Welcome back to From the Belly. I'm Doug Wheeler. I say it every episode. I guess it's become my new tagline, and that is I'm the owner and operator of this small enterprise. And I'm really proud of the work that we've been able to do because this is first and foremost a guest centric program. It's really not about me in regards to me trying to promote From the Belly or anything. And that if this is your first time to listen, that's the name of the podcast. This is really about allowing my guest to shine. That's what it's about. And guests have been able to take this, we'll call interview, conversation, program, and use it for their betterment. And that makes me smile every time I do it. So today, all the way from Portland, Oregon, and I'm sitting in McMinnville, Oregon, I have Margaret Marcuson, who I'm like really just jazzed about talking to. Margaret, welcome.
Thank you.
How did I find Margaret? You know that most of the time I find my guests on Facebook. It's probably the only reason I've stayed on Facebook. I didn't find Margaret that way. I found Margaret through the grapevine of some folks here I read something that you wrote, and then I poked around here at First Baptist Church in McMinnville, and they said, yeah, you read this and you read that. But nobody that I talked to said they explicitly knew Margaret. But then when I talked to Margaret, she's like, oh, I know First Baptist Church really well. It's not like those people forgot to mention, but I've probably talked to people that didn't know Margaret. But you know a lot of people from this community, right?
I do. Yeah. I've preached there numerous times over the
Oh
years.
my gosh, that is so cool. What decades were those that you preached there?
Starting in the 2000s, at last time might have been 2018 or 19.
Right on. Do you remember one specific sermon that you delivered and maybe one moment from a sermon that you were like, I'm right in the groove here?
Wow. You know something? That is a very good question. That's a tough question. However, I do
I know
remember
it's that.
I got an assignment to preach about Mary Magdalene. And I remember my sister-in-law is a sacred art expert, and she found this image for me from the Middle Ages, from southern France, of Mary Magdalene in a pulpit.
Wow.
And I just loved sharing that with the folks over there. It was very inspiring to me, and I think to them.
Was that your text? I mean, that was...
Yeah, it was. I can't remember the exact text. It was some
That's
text
fine.
related to Mary Magdalene, maybe Mary in the garden after the resurrection.
Wow. Maybe we'll talk more about your work with Mary and what you imagine her to be. Let me read a little bit of your bio, and then we'll take it from there. And I'll mention a few things, and then we have some specific questions that I'm going to ask Margaret that I think she'll like me asking because I got a sense she's got some answers for me and for you listeners. And I do want to give a specific shout out to my home church, which within the last year, First Baptist Church. And there's going to be some people here that really, really want to listen to Margaret, maybe from a little different angle, which is always cool. Margaret helps clergy get lighter and less burdened. Working with leaders from over 20 denominations, when I saw that, I had to say, wait, am I seeing 2-0 there? That's a lot of denominations across North America as teacher and coach. She's an American Baptist minister, having served as pastor at First Baptist Church in Gardner, Massachusetts for 13 years. Margaret lives in Portland, Oregon, and she says, that's where I sing in 2 choirs. And I thought, well, that was cool. Okay, so Margaret has written 3 books. The first in 2009, Leaders Who Last. I love good book titles. That's a good one. Second, Money and Your Ministry. That'll get your attention. That was in 2014. And her forthcoming book that we're going to talk a lot about today, and that's Sustainable Ministry. And by the way, a recent book, you might know about this book that I read, and I said, not only is this a good book because I finished it, but also the title. Where is that book? Here it is. I might botch it a bit. I left it at home. How to Lead When You Don't Know Where You're Going.
Oh, yes, that's a fantastic book.
You know Susan's work.
Yes, I do. That's just outstanding.
What a title.
Yeah, it's a great title. And it's so true. That's what everybody's facing.
Okay. Wow. That could get us into some conversation, couldn't it? Okay. So my first question to get us rolling is, I look at my phone because I take pictures of it and whatever, because I used to have all these notes around me and it would just become so confusing. This is simple. Sorry, I'm looking like that old guy looking on his phone. What are the biggest challenges you see clergy in the parish facing now? Floor is yours, Mark.
All right. Well, I'll start with a story about my dad. So my dad lived into his 90s. He was a church person most of his adult life. And late in his life, he had some dementia, and he could never quite remember what I did after I left parish ministry to do this coaching and teaching. So he would say, what is it that you do anyway? And I would say, well, I help pastors handle their biggest ministry challenges. And he would say, what are their biggest ministry challenges? And
That's good.
before I could answer, he would just look at me and say, people, right? And I
Mm,
would say, right, Dad. So it is always the people, and sometimes the people are us, the challenge. So I do want to talk a little bit about both external and internal challenges that
right on.
clergy face. And some of
Yes.
them are larger than individual people. There are these, huge institutional pressures on church, and people just aren't going to church as much as they used to, and the ones that are don't go as often. So are these
Mm,
stresses. And those people in the congregation are often looking to the clergy leader, to fix it, to save the
mm,
congregation, to preach better, to do whatever more better. So that's a lot of pressure. And of course, this wider context of political polarization, religious polarization, raises everybody's anxiety, and people who
mm.
are anxious don't think as clearly, and that includes pastors. So then there are well, go ahead. You go ahead and respond, and then I can talk a little more about the internal
It
challenges.
got me thinking about it, and we don't have to. I think this is a complementary train track to what you're talking about. Is that I just spent a week with some folks in, I always get it wrong. Where was I? I was south of Atlanta with predominantly a group of Presbyterian Church USA clergy doing transitional ministry. That was the text that we used, Susan's book, this liminal space and this interim transitional installed pastors. I learned kind of the polity of the Presbyterian Church and even the language that denomination has. But one of the things that really stood out to me, and it made me think when you said people are thinking, hey, preach better, hey, do this, let's do a capital campaign, whatever it be, just to rescue and save the church, is that we talked specifically about throughout the week. The theme was how technical solutions get applied to adaptive challenges. So you look for these. An example was, if you have a hot water heater that's out, it's a pretty easy fix, right? You don't have to have a big adaptive challenge. I mean, you might have to try to raise some money, but you just say, okay, the technical fix to this is we just get a new hot water heater. But technical solutions don't solve adaptive challenges. So that got me thinking about somebody saying, well, just preach better and you'll get more people here. And it's kind of like, well, oh, so that's going to be the solution. And I'm sure you have a way to speak to that
Yeah,
about
well, and
just adaptive.
another technical fix. If we revive our youth group, then our church will
There
do
you go.
okay. Well, are there any young people in your community? Maybe not. In some
Mm,
communities, not a lot. So, well, and I think this gets to the this what I want to talk about, the internal challenges, and
yes.
which is, so it's a hard job any way you look at it. And we come into it with our own vulnerabilities and limitations, as well as our strengths and maybe a strong sense of call. And so we can get caught up, when people project on us, and sometimes we take it right in, and we go into ministry because we want to be helpful and do good for people and make a difference in the world. And that sometimes we think if we just work harder, do more, do what they want, keep them happy, it'll all be all right. And then we collapse from exhaustion because we just can't fulfill all those expectations. Nobody
Mm,
could. Jesus couldn't. It's not possible.
mm.
So to be able to work on ourselves in the context of ministry, it's sort of a lifelong learning plan to hold on to yourself in this role.
To hold on to yourself in this role. So, can you maybe tell us a story and even tell us some of the ingredients of a pastor or minister or whatever the title is taking care of themselves in relationship to, as you say, this very difficult task? What works, what doesn't work? What have you seen work? Maybe a story that you would tell, of course, anonymous names and
Yeah.
whatever. However you want to go about that.
Well, I could talk a little bit about myself. When I was serving that church in
Sure.
Massachusetts, I know that I felt responsible for their future. And, I when I was in the middle of it, I was on the verge of burnout, and I began to study with this Rabbi Edwin Friedman, who taught many Christian clergy how
Mm,
to manage themselves in ministry using family systems thinking. He was a rabbi and family therapist. He said, so stress comes less from overwork than from taking responsibility for the problems of others. And I thought, wow, I want to know more about that. Somebody said to me once, get a church lady to put that in needlepoint.
you can still do that.
Yes.
That's good. And you knew him, didn't you? I mean,
I did. Yeah, I studied with him for just about a year and a half before he
goodness
died.
sakes. I mean, what an
Yeah,
opportunity.
it really was an opportunity. And, um,
Hmm.
so learned that my primary responsibility was to inform myself, and to the degree I could be responsible to inform myself, I would be a better pastor to these people, that they were responsible for their future. So this, I was serving a church that started in 1830, someplace like that. It's like, here I
Moons ago.
am. Yeah, a long time ago, I got my little window. I was there. I was the second longest serving pastor, so I had my influence, but it was just a little blip in a way. And they're still still open, and
They're still.
still doing ministry. Everybody, I think in New England, it's been challenging for a lot of
Mm,
churches
mm,
to keep
mm.
themselves going, but their doors are open and they're worshiping on Sunday, and I think that's really a great thing.
Would that be considered? These are some of the nomenclature from the past week, referred to as like I mean, literally a steeple church. It's a big building, a steeple. It's
Well, it definitely was.
old.
Yeah, it was old. It wasn't like a tall steeple church, like a downtown big First
Right?
Boston or Atlanta, but it was. It was a white steeple church.
A white steeple
and
church.
and we oh, let me just tell you another story.
Please.
We lived right next door to the church, and when I first got there, I would pull down the shades on the church side of the parsonage on my day off, because I just did not want to look at the
Mm,
church. And over time, I noticed I wasn't doing that anymore. Looking back, I had better inside boundaries.
I was going to say
Yeah,
something
something had
shifted.
shifted. And then when I was getting ready to leave after 13 years, I noticed I was doing it again. So I was trying to
Oh, you were.
separate. I was trying to separate, from
Oh, yeah.
from
Something different happening internally.
yeah, that's right. As I was,
Interesting.
getting ready to go.
Wow. Is 13 years then, and maybe we'll ask it in the context of now, is 13 years a long run?
It's a pretty good run. It's not the longest. I've heard that the average across denominations is about 5 years,
Is it really?
with some being very short because it doesn't work out, and then some
Yeah,
being
right, right.
over decades long. So I don't know what the longest I've heard. Certainly, maybe 40, something around 40. The shortest is probably like 2 months.
Yeah, right. I spent time with 8, 9 other individuals this past week in Georgia, and I don't think anybody was that 2 month deal, but there was somebody that was riding close to 30 years.
Yeah.
I don't know if this is the best way to articulate what I'm trying to get at, but it's just a thought that popped in my mind. Does a church building itself, does it speak to a neighborhood? What the actual building itself? Maybe not so much the architecture and it's made this way or that way, but and let's ask it now currently. What as a church sits on a city block or sits out in the middle of nowhere, what is it saying to the world? How do people interpret what a church is if they've never been inside the space?
Well, that is a good question. And the only answer I could come up with is it depends. It depends on the history of that church in the neighborhood. It depends on the nature of the building. If it's shabby and run down, that says one thing.
Mm,
If it's fancier than the neighborhood around it, that says another thing. And the
mm,
people come with their own varied experiences. And, I've thought often about people coming into a church for the first time because, someone who doesn't serve a congregation anymore. I mean, I'm part of a congregation, but I visited many churches, and I noticed myself. I'm on the in between, slight introvert, I guess. Walking into a church even as an ordained person, it takes a little
mm,
something when I don't know
mm.
anybody there, and they don't know me in my role. I'm just a visitor, and I feel for people. It's scary.
That's good. I know when I first started coming to First Baptist Church, the way I worded it the first time, it just came out of me. Somebody said, well, maybe what was the glue that stuck, or why did you came pretty anxious about even coming back inside a church with a group of people and the whole deal. And I said, well, one of the things was I wasn't undergreeted or overgreeted.
Right, right. Which people have different needs that way, so it's a little hard to assess from a church's point of view.
I was going to a church outside of Seattle, and oh, I look back on that and just go, wow, what in the world was that all about? But my brother, who is not a church person, it's always good to get the perspective of somebody that goes, what the heck or hell are you all doing? But afterwards, I was kind of curious what he thought. I knew he was very uncomfortable being in the space. Very uncomfortable. I mean, I knew he would be. And man, he was fidgety. He was uncomfortable. He said to me, and I won't put all the words to what he said, but he said that one woman with the robe on, man, she was in my face. What is her problem, man? He was overgreeted.
Yes.
It was intrusive, man.
Yeah, that is
You
funny.
know, and maybe it
Yeah.
was coming out of we need if you're new, we need you
Oh
here.
yeah, and if you're new and if you're a young visitor, whoa.
Wow. All right. You know, back to something you said earlier about the responsibility piece that a clergy take on the responsibility. And I'm thinking of somebody who might challenge that to say, well, hey, and I'm not feeling this, but I'm thinking of some outside voice saying, well, hey, whatever the job is, I mean, if a person works for Microsoft, if they work at the local tire store, whatever, is they got responsibilities. So this idea of separating out, it's like so you can imagine maybe that initial challenge too. Well, that's what a pastor's supposed to do.
Right.
And I know you're not in any way dismissing responsibility, but is there some unique pull within the church context? It's unique to you wouldn't even experience it all the pressure at Amazon or Microsoft. It's something about church and what's expected and the spiritual component that actually adds another layer to what the pressure is. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. I would say, I mean, I think some of the pressures in the corporate environment are, well, frankly, ridiculous.
And
You know,
they're crushing.
crushing, absolutely crushing. And I do think that in ministry, the pastors have much more control over their time than many people in or large organizational environments. But I do think that when you get people, you got a bunch of families, often multi-generational families, and God, in the same room. It can be an intense mix. I know that there was a woman in our church in Massachusetts who was very, very upset with what was going on. I don't remember the issue. My mom, who lived in California, said, "Well, why doesn't she just go to another church?" I said, "Well, Mom, you don't quite get it. In New England, you don't just go to another church.
You just don't go to
When your grandparents have been there, all these generations. So we've got these long-standing relationships. A pastor comes in, and we've been there even just after a few years, 4, 5 years, and other people, they've had these relationships for 35 years that are in positions of responsibility, or they have opinions. You always, it's very tricky. I mean, this is what I coach people about in my own work, how to navigate these complexities of relationships in a way that doesn't do you in. And then just getting back to responsibility. I mean, you're responsible to the church, but not for it. I think those are very different. So
can you unpack that a bit?
Yeah. So, well, and I one of the things that I do want to talk about is to be really clear. I think this is a critical part of ministry is and it's the shorthand I use is just get clear. Get clear about yourself, about your role, about what your responsibilities are and what they are not. So, for example, there are tasks. You got to show up and do worship and preaching, right? That's just it goes with the job. You have to attend to pastoral care. You have to show up at key meetings. Those are clear. Those are responsibilities. I would like to talk about money a little bit later, but you are responsible to be involved with stewardship and generating resources for the church.
That's the work on the. If you're a farmer, that's the work on the farm.
Yeah, right. There is work on the farm, and then there's this larger. It's kind of you're holding a space for people to encounter God, and it's a joint responsibility with key leaders and the people as a whole to do this work together. But it is not up to you. But most of us, we go into ministry. We do have that powerful sense of responsibility, need to be needed. We love to be needed,
Not just like
love. Maybe I'm just talking about myself.
Okay, maybe, and feel free to grab little, and you would do this. You don't need me to grant you permission to do this, but be able to take little pieces of stories that you have to put them into a collage of. Can you give a little story or an example of somebody who had to work with that love piece? Not only do I like to be liked, but I love to be liked. Can you?
Yes. Well, I was just talking with someone yesterday about, they said they have a difficulty, having a hard time having difficult conversations that need to be had. And they're big strength. They've said this, I can see it, other people see it. This person's very, very empathetic. And our strengths are our weaknesses, right?
Oh,
So that powerful sense of empathy gives them this ability to be with people at these most vulnerable, difficult times.
mm.
And then sometimes you just have to have the hard conversations with leaders, with staff, and that is a growing edge that we're working on together.
And so if somebody, be it a congregation as a whole or certain individuals, they really take to that empathetic nature that you have, when you show up a different way, that could be a real jar, right?
It is. Sometimes I say, so if people get upset with you, it might be, not always, but it might be a sign you're on the right track.
I heard that this past week.
It's a bit of an assessment because you got to pay attention to feedback, right? You're not living in a bubble, and sometimes I make mistakes, and I need to own those mistakes. But when a leader is growing, it upsets the balance in the congregation or whatever system you're in, and people don't always like it.
You must be such a gift to the people that you work with, because I hear there's a therapy lens, there's a spiritual direction lens, i.e., a spiritual formation, there's a coaching lens that you bring. I mean, just I would think that it's so valuable. That's one of the things that stood out to me during the week. I was the non-clergy person among these folk, and I was a little bit on the outside. Some of them had licensed counseling degrees, but just about everybody in the group said, one of the things I do for self-care is I got a therapist.
Yeah, right, right.
And so I asked a few questions like, well, what's the quality of the therapist that a clergy person? I thought I was asking some great question, and I get the answer was, it's just like anybody. You make a connection, they show up in the space, they're a safe space. It helps if they have a little knowledge of clerical work or clergy work, but they're a therapist, and I went, oh, okay. So it's all kind of the same. But you would agree, right? I'm sure you would
Yeah,
agree.
well,
It's just
I'm just thinking of another thing that Edwin Friedman used to say, which is, what you bring is not technique. This is to a room of clergy. What you bring is not technique, but the nature of your presence. So I really believe that this gets back to that, that idea of like getting clear. When you are clear about who you are and what your call truly is and what it is not, you show up with people in a different way. And, if you move in that direction and people are used to you being all, giving them whatever they want, for example, they may not thank you for it initially, but it's in everybody's best interest
mm,
for you to kind of hold on to yourself and be able to say no and to say yes to the right things.
say yes to the right things. You mentioned a few minutes ago that you want to talk about money, so we want to do that. And there was something else that you alluded to that you hoped that we would get to. Do you remember what that was?
I don't remember, but I do want to talk about one other piece, which I think I've been talking about somewhat, and that is sort of so they get clear, and then to stay connected as an essential component to getting clear. So you go off, you think, what are your principles, your priorities, but then you practice over time, or the weeks and the months and the years of staying
Mm,
connected with people. And I believe it's a kind of ministry discipline to be in
okay.
touch with key leaders, to be able to connect with people who disagree with you. You may not even talk about the issue at hand, but just to know that
Mhm.
these relationships, they're like money in the bank in the best way, that you can draw on when things get a little bit bumpy, that they know they can trust you, and that you can handle that, them being upset with you, that you can
Okay.
listen to them, that you're not just trying to convince them that you're right and they're wrong,
Hmm.
um,
Hmm.
that you're
Hmm.
really present with people.
My brain tends to do this. I'm listening to you, and then and it might be something separate, but I'm imagining what would it be like to sit with Edwin Friedman. His book, the first, I always forget the title of the family systems book
Generation to generation.
that was handed to me. By the way, I need to make a note. I need to get that back to my friend, the Episcopal priest that gave it to me. That's his book. But then I got Failure of Nerve, and it's just like, man, I've read that 4 or 5 times. I've referred that book out to people that aren't even spiritual people per se, or at least, they're not practicing or whatever, but it's such a powerful book. And, the title kind of leads you to think he's just going to be some authoritarian prickhead, that's just going to be just like all over people. And it's like, Failure of Nerve, that can be interpreted so many different ways. I guess one would be you haven't differentiated, right? You've not had the nerve to even do that.
Yeah, yeah. So, and that I think that's an ongoing process, but it does require nerve to be a pastoral leader in times like these. You have to have a strong stomach, and I'll fess up. I'm conflict averse with the rest of them.
Hmm.
And especially it's not just for women, but definitely the women in my family, we're not ones to mix it up. My mom hated conflict.
But would you say that if people listened into your work with people, they wouldn't, unless you self-confessed and told stories of the fact that you're conflict averse, would people hear that, or would people hear, man, the way she shows up in that, she's not conflict adverse at all. She's inviting people to come on into it. Would that be the case?
I don't know. You'd have to ask them. I guess I would say that that's been something I've worked on, for decades now, and
Yeah, wow.
I'm much more able to lean in when
To
needed.
lean in.
Yeah, yeah. And sometimes I have clients or colleagues who come from families that were highly conflicted, and
Mm,
there are some wounds from that, of course.
sure.
But the way I think about it is like they can get into other people's faces when needed in a way that I'll never be able to do.
Get that feeling too.
It's a blessing that they bring.
You want to bring them in with you and say,
Yeah,
"Well, you
that's
do it.
right. That's right.
You go for it, and then I'll do the cleanup."
Yeah, that's right. That's right, which I'm pretty good at.
I'm sure you are. It's that gift of empathy, like, wow, that stung, didn't it? Do you think it's an okay time to shift to money?
Well, so the one other thing I want to talk about before we
No,
shift
please do.
to the money is sort of
Absolutely.
this is sort of my shorthand for differentiation of self, which is to get clear, stay connected, and keep calm. And in this new book, Sustainable Ministry,
Yes.
call it Get Reflective, and that is really being able, and this I think where a therapist can be really helpful to help you reflect on yourself, your own vulnerabilities. Maybe it's over empathy, or maybe it's under empathy. Maybe it's an inability to set boundaries, whatever it might be, to be able to manage self. And I really think that one of the best ways to work on that is to reflect on your position in the family you grew up in, where
Mm,
we all learn how to relate to other people in those families. And every family has its strengths and its problematic patterns, and to be able to celebrate those strengths and work on, like I've tried to work on this challenge with conflict over the years and my tendency to take too much responsibility.
mm.
And I'm on the lifetime plan, and I think that we can be compassionate with ourselves around those vulnerabilities, but to continue to work on developing more capacity in ourselves.
I'm on the lifetime plan. I'm going to remember that. Wow, does that just get at a lot with a very few words? I was thinking about just this onion. We often use that imagery of just peeling the onion back. I had my spiritual direction appointment this morning, and it's like one more layer.
Yeah, one more layer. That's a great
There's
way to
just,
think about it. Yeah,
there's just,
yeah. And I think the other thing I think about is, this relentless tendency to overfunction that most clergy have, to be overly responsible for anything and everything. And so I think of myself as a recovering overfunctioner with frequent relapses. And
but the positive or bright side of that is that's what gets a person into the door, right?
yeah,
That's
right.
what,
It is like, you're on the edge of burnout. Maybe that's a gift to say, okay, I've got to do this differently.
back to that onion peeling thing. One of the things that we touched on in my appointment with Joe this morning was, we didn't even talk about it explicitly, but I know we were getting at it, and I think you would appreciate this from this internal work that you've done within yourself and that you do is we often think about. I think, in a lot of my early Christian training, I had a mystical experience at age 18, and then and I mean, some of it was good, but I got indoctrinated with all this theology stuff, which I've had to shed and deconstruct and do a lot of things. And I see the bright side of those pieces. But we often think about, at least the way I was trained, is, the Spirit of God is doing things like reaching people and growing something, all these external things. And then you think about when you make that shift that the Spirit's work is this internal work. So peeling these layers back this morning, mine was about family system stuff. And I just saw myself in a different light, understanding some things in that space. But that's the Spirit's work, right?
Yeah, it is.
But you got to be attuned to that, and you got to have a theology that goes, wow. I mean, there's no separate. That's not secular work, and you don't have to have a Christian therapist to do it, right?
Right. I mean, you can always pray for your family members, or we try to pray for family members. Just mention their name to God. I figure God knows. I might have ideas about their lives, but
And we're talking
maybe,
about folks that are here and folks
Yeah,
that have
folks. Yeah,
gone
folks that.
on.
Yeah, right. Folks that are gone on. Yeah, it's one thing I appreciate about the Episcopal Church is
Mm.
this idea that prayer is just bigger than the here and now.
That's a great little segue before we hit the money thing. And then I got a few other things I want to ask you. 20 denominations that you've worked within. So if you meet your neighbor at the common mailbox, let's say on the cul-de-sac in the neighborhood, and this will get to the why not church or maybe why church too. That's where it kind of came from in my
Yeah.
head. I imagine one of my neighbors, not explicitly that I've had the experience, but I imagine one of them saying it's Sunday morning, where the heck are you going? I'm going to church. I have a difficult time even saying that, to be honest with you. I really do. I got my own stuff that I'm working through about that. I'm happy to be going, but I'm going to tell my neighbor because I don't want to create that division, because
Yeah.
church so many times is so divisive. Where was I in that? Maybe got lost in my
Yeah, we're talking about
rambles.
20 denominations.
20 denominations. What do you do with all, and maybe it's something that you've moved on and I'm just stuck, but all these splinter things and these people splinter off from this and whatever, and we're supposed to all work together. I mean, how have you been able to make some sense of how in the world does God even hold this with all this feuding that's happened?
Yeah, well, it's
Hmm.
I think what's helped me is to learn to think about relationships and what happens in human relationships and thinking systemically about it. So when human beings get anxious, sometimes they glob together and sometimes they bust apart. This is
Hmm.
just the pattern. It happens in families, it happens with nations, it happens in churches for sure. And to get a little bit more neutral about it. I mean, you without
That's good.
without minimizing the relationship damage that happens in these
Sure.
splits, without excusing bad behavior, but to just be realistic about the way humans
That's
interact.
really good. That's really
That's
good.
really helped me a lot, and it's helping me right now in the midst of all the craziness.
I
That,
was just
you
going
know,
to ask you, put it in a craziness
yeah,
now.
yeah. Let me just say one thing about the craziness now.
Please do.
And about boundaries. So, one boundary that I think is critical, really for everybody, but I'm thinking about pastoral leaders, is to set some boundaries with yourself in the news and to make some thoughtful choices, to get clear about what's important to you and just limit. Because
Mm.
the news media, their business model is to raise your anxiety and get your attention.
And then react, right?
Exactly, and repeat. So
Mm.
we want to be aware, involved, connected, know what's going on, but also not be flooded constantly because you can't
Mm.
do your work if you're flooded.
That's true.
That's my little rant.
No, rant on because that clearly is important for because I see that every once in a while. I see the way I get carried downstream by Facebook,
Yeah, right.
and it's like I'm somebody else for a moment, and it's like I don't like the the very one I'm criticizing. I've just become.
Right.
I'm just like, what?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Just, shut up, go home to me.
Money.
Money. And then we want to make sure that we talk about, and maybe money's a key piece. Now, one of your book titles was explicitly about money, but I wanted to also talk about this new book that's coming out. We'll hold everybody, myself included, about like when's that going to hit the streets. But money in church, is that what we're talking about?
Yeah, money. Well, so I just one tip. Well, in general, I want to introduce this by saying, so I was talking about overfunctioning and how most pastors are over responsible. And in money, it's a little bit different. Some pastors overfunction in the area of money, but a lot of pastors who overfunction in many other areas underfunction in the area of money. They're anxious
Okay.
about it. They may not even ever preach about it. They have a lot of avoidance. And, early in my ministry, I knew I was responsible to do it, and I really tried to lean into it, but I really didn't want to.
Didn't want to.
I really did not want to.
You didn't even want to say money in a
Yeah,
in a, in a service.
yeah. So I guess I would challenge people to lean into, if that's you, to lean into the money conversation somewhat more
Mm.
and to develop your capacity for inviting people to think about their resources from a spiritual perspective. That does
Mhm.
include giving, but it also includes just their life in general because they deal with
Mm.
money every day, and we usually give them just about no help in how to think about
Interesting.
it in the light of their
How to
faith.
think about it. Maybe if they think about it, maybe the most they think about it is at the bank or with our financial advisor.
Yeah.
Which I mean, I'm totally in support of. I'm looking for one currently. But I guess we're talking about what to think spiritually about it. I was just reading a passage from the Old Testament this morning. I went looking for something. And the thing that just was blowing my mind was it essentially was just talking about all these prizes in this Old Testament story that are all money related. And I'm just like, wow, I think that's a lot of money right there. Where's that all going? But the author clearly wanted to say something about, you know, down to how many gold plates there were.
Right.
And it's just like, wow, that's a lot of money, I think. What else about money? So you got my attention with not over functioning, but under functioning. So a bit shy about talking about the money. And so why is that? What's systemically going on there?
Well, money is a natural focus for anxiety in congregations. And I talked to one pastor once who, I mean, he grew up, his parents were church people. He never even knew that his parents gave to the church, and they never talked about money or about giving with him. So he's going to have a hard time addressing those issues in ministry, and that was at a growing edge.
Mm.
I spoke at an event also where it was clergy and lay people, and this layman came up to me afterwards. He said, our pastor doesn't want to talk about money, and we don't want him to. So they were both happy with it, but I thought, well,
We got a problem.
might not be a match made in heaven. So
But but they're thinking it's a match made in heaven, right?
yeah,
Because they don't talk about it,
They
and we
are.
don't want them to talk
Yeah,
about it.
and sometimes pastors want to be involved with the money, and the movers and shakers around the money don't want the pastor in on the conversations. And I think that's
Right.
another kind of work where you kind of got to elbow in and say, I'm going to be at this table.
What's the mentality there? Is there
It's
kind of a
because money,
historical mentality?
you just you tend to the spiritual stuff, and we'll handle the money.
Oh, so then you get into kind of a deeper thing, right? About the theology of how
Yeah.
those are split.
Yeah,
And the,
exactly. I mean,
it,
we have very dualistic attitudes about money. So money,
okay.
the Bible says, it doesn't say money is the root of all evil. It says the love of money is the root of all
Mm,
evil. All kinds of
mm.
evil, I guess it really says. So we confuse those things.
Quick story on my family. It's interesting. My father had made a lot of money. I mean, not compared to some people, but he had made a lot of money. And my mother had this mystical conversion experience almost at the age of 50. She grew up in an American Baptist church, but not that people don't drink and dance as American Baptists, but mom was not interested in church. But she has this experience, and my father's witnessing all this change within her. And then she says it's time to start giving to the church where they were attending. My father's like, I don't do that. But she worked with him. He's a very stubborn guy, but she worked with him. And over time, they started giving whatever percentage was. And my mother claimed all the way up until she left this world at age 90, which was about 10 years ago, she said, oh, your father's business exploded. It was already plentiful, but it exploded. I believed her. She said he couldn't turn away, or he had to turn away clients, and people were spending more money than it ever spent with him. He was self-employed as a consultant. So I've always think about that, and I think, I don't know what that was about.
Yeah, right. I do.
Was that their faith? Was that whatever? Because I can easily shoot that down to go, well, it's not a money lottery machine. I mean, what's
Right.
going on here? But for them, it was real. She owned it as real. And I thought, even if it wasn't, and dad was just working harder or found his magic, it's a great story.
Yeah, it's a great. Well, and they learn something about the gift that giving gives you, not just financially, but in terms of
Yeah, because
yourself and the meaning of being generous.
and then they gave
Yeah,
more away.
yeah,
Then they gave more away. That's what she said was the blessing was now we can even,
yeah.
they were already giving, but they gave more away. Anything else about money?
Well, that's probably enough for now. I could talk about that for another hour, but I'm not
I
gonna.
bet you could. Yeah. Yeah. How about your new book, Margaret? Why with two books under your belt, as they say, and good selling, important books that I'm sure you've been complimented on? Why another book?
Well, I guess I would say for such a time as this, to use some of these same ideas that I've reflected on, written on, and taught for all these years, to say now it's harder than ever, and can I produce something that can help pastors and other leaders sustain themselves? So the title is Sustainable Ministry, and the
Yes,
subtitle is How to Lead and When to Nap.
that's good.
So
That's an attention grabber.
yeah, I really think that part of the importance of it, this is like, it's about setting limits and understanding what I said before, what your responsibility is and what it isn't. And it is not, your responsibility is not to burn yourself out in God's service. There are times like, beginning of the pandemic, everybody was working like crazy to figure out how to make it work, but you can't,
Jeez.
you just, people are still tired, really.
From that.
From that, yeah, I think that people and institutions are recovering. So to learn how to work at a pace that is sustainable, to take on goals that are realistic, not pipe dreams or a laundry list where you continually feel burdened, like there's just too much to do here. Where maybe in some cases you're able to say, okay, we cannot do as much as a church as we used to, and to
Mm-hmm.
have some of those hard conversations with people about
Mm,
what can we do with the capacity that we have, the people, the energy, the financial resources, and to take on, what is God calling us to do now in this situation
mm.
that we can actually do.
Is that, have you found that when that question is asked, what is God doing with us now? And we're asking that all the time anyways, but let's say it becomes like, that's the question. We're looking for the answer, a congregation. Is it often, sure, here I go wanting to box God in, but is it often something that's counterintuitive to what they think they're supposed to do with a specific ministry or a specific something, or just about the way they're to embody the message in a neighborhood? Is it often kind of a jar, like, wow, we never would have found that? That's a real challenge. It brings us joy, but trepidation as well. Do you find it's often a, like, the Spirit's going to shift something that can be a bit jarring?
I don't know if I know exactly. What I do know is that when a new ministry has some organic connection with the church's story, that it's more likely to be doable.
Mm,
So you're, in a way, you're looking to the past not to recreate it, but for clues. What are our strengths?
that
And
are in the
maybe that
DNA.
are in the DNA, and
Wow.
what is on our doorstep, which might, some of that might be jarring.
Or we might be tempted to do something that's not in line,
Yeah,
like we want to leap too far.
yeah, that's right. Or pretend to be
Interesting.
something that we're not.
That we're not. And we know that doesn't work with a person, so why would it work with a body of
Yeah,
people,
that's right.
right?
It is very tricky because, like you say, there's a lot of these adaptive challenges, and we have to adapt. And some churches don't want to, and that's a
Mm.
problem.
And churches are closing, right,
Yeah,
Margaret?
yeah, and they are, and some churches need to close. Yeah, and there is there's a grieving
Mm.
process that goes with that, but
Yeah.
pretending isn't the best use of our energy either.
Right. Margaret, what have you cried about in your work? Whatever form of what crying means to you, maybe literally or just in your soul. But what have you cried about in regards to the church across these 20 denominations?
That is a good question. I mean, I'm not much of a crier, but it breaks my heart. I mean, I grew up in the evangelical church, and the co-opting of the evangelical church by the right wing breaks my heart. It just
Mm.
does. It breaks my heart when churches, beat up on their pastors and then expect to get another one after they chased off the last one, five in a
Mm.
row. When pastors are driven out, just like five people basically can mobilize and get rid of a pastor in some
Yeah.
congregations.
Yeah.
So that is just heartbreaking to me. And when people, when a pastoral family leaves a church under painful circumstances, and the kids lose their faith, that's heartbreaking to me.
There must be just a sense of just being lost in the world.
Yeah, there really is. I teach in a workshop, leadership and ministry, that's connected with Columbia Theological Seminary, but they also have a program
Mm.
called Ministering to Ministers, which is for pastors who have
Mm.
experience forced termination, which happens, more than you might think. I don't work in that program, but I've heard some of the stories, and I've worked with people who've experienced it, and it really is.
Just gut wrenching.
It is. It's gut wrenching. And I do work with people to help them depersonalize some of the criticism, because it's
Mm.
intended personally, but it isn't really personal.
Mm.
It has to do with the role and the projection onto that individual in that role. But church people, this is, gets to your question of like, why not church? Church people can be really terrible sometimes.
So with about 10 minutes left, we're going to launch into that. And I remember you saying, I really appreciated what you said when you and I talked. You said, Doug, if we have time, I'd love to take a stab at. That was your exact language. I'd love to take a stab at that title. And I've never explicitly put it out there with a guest. I mean, we talk about why not church or maybe why church. But yeah, so I'm going to ask you, just like right on the nose. It's like, why not church, or maybe why church?
Yeah. Well, why not church is the churches are, they can be, some churches are unhealthy places to be. And some churches don't deserve pastors, and denominations send in, young seminarians or new seminarians, even if they're not young, one after another in some cases. Friedman called it cannon fodder, for these really sick churches.
Mm.
And I tell people, if there's not enough raw material, or what's the word I want, if there's not enough healthy people in the congregation for you to work with, even a core group, maybe it's time to look for another call, that you don't have to stay there out of duty.
You probably have some cool stories, and you don't have to give them, but you have some cool stories where somebody just goes, and what is that line in business that I've heard? If you're going to fail quickly.
Yeah.
So I bet you've got some good stories around. I mean, they're sad stories, but it's like, I'm out of here.
Well, I will say I did write. I was writing something actually. There's a piece of this that's in the book where to spend more time. This is the connected part, but to spend more time with the healthier people in your congregation, because the unhealthy people will suck your time up. And I had put something out writing about that, and one woman wrote me and said, I looked around and I realized there wasn't enough here, and she did start looking right away for another call.
Wow.
She just, so I think that discernment is important. And so many churches are so focused on their own survival, they can't think about ministry, really.
What is ministry?
Well, ministry is, there could be internal ministry where you are serving people within the congregation, where it's not just about wanting to meet your own needs. And then there's external ministry where you're serving spiritual, maybe physical needs of people beyond your congregation. So that's one way to think about it anyway.
Margaret, it reminds me, this one stopped me. Not dead in my tracks. I was still alive, but it stopped me, man. One of the gentlemen on this week that I spent, I think I referred to him earlier. He's a Presbyterian Church USA pastor in Florida, and he's coming up on 30 years. And we were talking about, without me throwing it out there, the name of my podcast, at least this season, Why Not Church or Maybe Why Church. And we were talking about that. It dawned on me, wow, we as a group or a cohort, we're talking about that. And Chris said, hey, I'll remind everybody, if you haven't heard it, it was new to me. Some archbishop at some point in the world said, essentially, I'm just going to probably butcher it, but this is paraphrased, the Church of Jesus Christ exists for the outside world. And it's just like, whoa. I mean, I feel a chill right now. It's like, man, it's not for we or the church. I mean, it is, I understand. It's not, but it's for the outside world. And what good are we to the world? What good is the church for the world? Not the afterlife. If you had to defend with your neighbor in a very beautiful way, what good is the church for the world?
Well, I'm just thinking about Jesus talking about the reign of God as basically, this is one thing I learned in seminary that was so powerful, that, God's reign, kingdom of God, as we talked about it, starts right now. It's not like just when we get to heaven, or however you think about that. That is, God's work is in the world right now, and we are part of that. And I think it's a ministry of presence. It's a ministry of action. But also, I think some of these routines and rituals, I think, our culture is kind of ritual starved. So just week by week worship, providing a space for, birth, marriage, and death, all of that. And people are desperate for community and for human connection. And church at its best offers those relationships, in some cases over a lifetime, in some cases just a quick touch that people can remember they have a positive experience. And also, in not all churches, but in many churches, it's a multi-generational community, which I think is not happening in a lot of places in our society as well. People are isolated, they're lonely, and when we're doing our work right, we're offering opportunities. In the building and outside the building for people to connect with others.
Absolutely. Be healthy in the building and be offering health to the outside world. Wow.
Yeah. So, and for all its faults, I still love the church, and I go to church, and I celebrate the good that I see and hope I can contribute to help it be stronger and healthier.
Is a Sunday morning service important in the world today?
That's a really good question. It's happening.
10 to 11?
10 to 11 or whenever it is. I don't know that it has to be Sunday morning. I think worship is important. And I do think that this is another thing I didn't even talk about the purpose of the church, to helping people connect with the divine is a critical part of ministry. And that might happen on Sunday morning. It might happen online. I think, being in person with people,
Yeah.
it can be a great thing, but one of my teachers used to say, if you have something you want or to solve a problem, his name was Dave Ellis. He said, what are 20 ways to get this? Or what are 20 ways to solve this problem? So, you could think about this in terms of ministry. What are 20 ways we could help people connect with God? What are 20 ways we could offer worship?
That's good.
What are 20 ways we could serve our community? And then then you see what jumps out, what makes your heart lift.
What becomes joyful that we have to offer.
Yeah.
It's beautiful. I could talk to you for many more hours, Margaret. You're a sage in this space, and I sense that you've earned it.
Well, thank you.
You bet. You're welcome. So I have we got a few minutes.
Okay.
So whatever age you are now, you're on a trip, and you decide you want to go to church. And so you look at whatever's available. We used to look in phone books, but of course you'd probably look on your phone, and that's fine. So you look and you look and you look and you decide, I'm going here this morning, whatever the faith persuasion is. And so you walk in the door. You've got maybe some of that nervousness you spoke about earlier. So you have a list of things that you're possibly nervous about. What's going to be said to me? How am I going to be accepted? Or whatever. Am I going to be called upon? Will somebody notice me and maybe want to talk to me in ways that I don't want to be talked to this morning? Whatever it be. And something really outside, like you've never had this experience before. All of a sudden, this church becomes just a hallway, and you feel like, I'm dreaming. I'm in another world. You check to go, now I'm here. I think I'm here, but dreams are interesting. And you're walking down a hallway, and there's a door to your right that you feel inclined to open. And you don't feel any fear about it, but you have no idea why you're even opening this door, because there's many doors and you're totally alone. You're not being escorted. Nobody's saying, well, you need to open this door, that door. You're going, what am I doing? This is the weirdest experience. I thought I was walking into a church, be it a service. You open the door, and sitting there is Margaret, the first month she took the pastorate in Massachusetts. There she sits. And you walk in, and the door closes automatically behind you, and you're drawn to sit with her. What would you say to her? What might she ask of you? If she didn't know you were her future self, but you knew she was your past self, what do you imagine would happen in that few minutes?
Wow, that is a great question. It does make me think of even earlier ministry where I was an interim pastor, when I had no one long before interim training.
Then go there. Then go into that space.
Well, because I can remember walking the halls of that little church thinking, I have no idea what I'm doing.
Truly feeling, I have
no idea what I'm doing. And it was, I think I would say, it'll be all right. Just keep learning, which I think is basically what I've set out to do over all these years. I'm still learning. I learn from my clients all the time, from going to church, talking to wonderful colleagues.
I can imagine, if I can interject, I can imagine that she might say, oh, but tell me more. I mean, tell me more. How do I do that? How do I do that? And how do I do that? And let's just imagine.
Yeah. Well, so I would probably quote my mother, who would say, just do the next thing.
Wow.
That's what she would say when I was anxious about, homework or whatever. Just do the next thing. Just do the next thing.
And Margaret, I got a feeling I'm pretty good at spotting talent. I bet you were a good student. I just got a feeling about that.
I know. I was.
You were, weren't you?
Yeah, I did sort of pride myself on that A student stuff, which is it's a mix.
I understand, but you're the one that I would tap. Her name was Teddy, and I would tap on Teddy's left shoulder if I could get behind her in class, and I would ask her to move a little to the right. Teddy Brock. So I've told Teddy this. I went from first grade all the way to 12, and I would tap, and I would want her to move to the right so I could take a peek at the answers. It was terrible. It was terrible. And I can't say she did it or not, but I sure wanted to be able to see. Well, this has been a joy. This has been a joy. Anything else you want to say to the folks listening?
Yeah, I will say a couple things. One is that my book, Sustainable Ministry, will be out in July. And one way to get notice of when it is released is to sign up for my newsletter, which is at margaretmarcuson.com. And I will put the link in the description.
Awesome.
And
Awesome.
I write something just about every week related to ministry and helping people get thoughtful about what they're up against and keep themselves going week to week.
Mm, beautiful. Here I come with more questions. How important is the Enneagram in understanding oneself in regards to ministry?
It is, well, it's one model. I think it can be useful. I like it as a typology because it talks about growth within your, and
Hmm.
expanding your repertoire. So
Mm.
it's not a fixed model.
Right, right. Is it important for in the Presbyterian Church, it's a session, in the American Baptist Church, I think I got this right, it's a board. Is it helpful to use those kind of psychometric, if you will, type of assessments to kind of know who's in the room and not to judge people and say, oh, you're a 7 and you'll always be that, and now I figured you out. But is it a way to kind of get acquainted with
I
the way people process?
I think anything you can do to help people understand, that people are different and to learn more about each other. And I will say, for in terms of church leadership, the variable that I'm looking for is personal maturity, like the ability to be able to
Mm,
be clear and to connect with others who have a different perspective.
wow, wow.
That's what I'm looking for if I'm looking
That's what you're looking
for
for.
leadership in a congregation.
Right on. That's a great place to stop. Margaret, this has been a joy.
Well,
And
thank you
we've had
so
such
much.
Oh gosh, yeah, yeah. We truly, I can't wait for your book to come out. I will read it. Sustainable Ministry. What was the subtitle again?
How to lead and when to nap.
To nap. I love it. Did that title, the main title, was that one that you shopped a lot or kicked the tires on a lot, or did it
Yeah,
just
well,
kind of?
I came up. I had a couple few options. I actually pulled my list, my email list,
Oh
and
wow.
they gave me some great feedback, and that this one was the top score, not by a lot, but
And then what
and,
about the subtitle?
well, the title was I came up with the title a long time ago,
Mhm.
but the subtitle is the one that I pulled.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that's the one that I asked them about.
Were you like, I'm open to everybody's feedback, but I'm not letting go of the word nap.
Well, every time I tell it to somebody, they laugh, which I think is a good sign.
That's a good sign. I
Because
did too.
we take ministry, it's serious work, but if you're too serious,
Hmm.
then you just really can't keep going.
That was one of the
Can you have a little
things.
fun with it?
That's one of the things that I enjoyed about being with these folks last week was there was just some really sweet humor. One expression by one of the individuals, he used it twice, and I said, "Chris, I've never heard. I'm from the South. You're from Tennessee. I never heard. I'm from Kentucky. I never heard anybody." He said it, and he said it just in passing. Then I brought it back, and he's like, "You never heard that before?" He would say, "It flew all over me." So he said, when my mother went to get the fly swatter, it flew all over me. I said, man, I love that expression.
That is
And
funny.
another thing, Margaret, that stood out to me last week as I processed my experience was just how beautiful our faith is, the beauty of our faith. I saw people shed tears around how it's been made to look like a monster, but it's a beautiful faith. It's a beautiful faith.
Yeah, I think it's important to celebrate.
Celebrate the beauty of the faith. All right, Margaret, thank you so much. If you'll hang with me while I put a stop to this and then don't go away because we might lose something.
Okay, sure.
I always tell people, and it's fine for them to listen. Some say, well, edit that out. I'm like, no, if we were talking, we're doing it. We want to watch it load up, and then you and I will be able to say goodbye to one another.
Okay, that'll be great.
Hang with me. Folks, thanks for listening. You know how to reach out to Margaret. Margaret, if somebody goes, I don't even know how to spell her last name, would you spell your last name?
Sure. Marcuson.
That's how you find Margaret. She lives in Portland. And AI might know that she sings in 2 choirs. All right. We didn't talk about AI stuff. It's probably good that we didn't. All right. Thanks, Margaret.
Sure.